Hello all, I'm joining you by candlelight, which is my natural habitat for this time of year, to share with you the recipe for our Magical Women winter tea. I've been devising this tea for a couple of weeks now, just thinking about something that we could drink together to refresh us in a number of different ways. At this dark time of year. Excuse my lovely beagle's tail as she wanders around. So I gave you a hint of the ingredients in a live video earlier, but I'm just going to recap them. And this tea, I will say, it's designed specifically to be drunk around these long evenings towards the solstice. It's a tea that's been designed to help with sleep, so to alleviate anxiety. It's a tea that's been designed with lots of anti-inflammatory and immune boosting ingredients, especially things to ward off coughs and colds and respiratory illnesses that are so rife at this time of year. But it's also a tea that's been designed for this time of rest, reflection and dreaming. The ingredients are connected to things like prophecy and memory and sight, because if we can find a pleasant way to do it, this is the perfect time of year to reflect on the year and the years that we've had leading up to this point, really take note of where we are now, and to dream about the things that we want for the future. So I'll read the ingredients connected to different things. So the main ingredients in this tea are mint and chamomile, and these are really good for nostalgia, for memory and focus. Partially that's because of their anxiety alleviating properties, but I mean, mint has often been used as a memory aid in the past, and it's very stomach settling, which really does help at this time of year when we all possibly are about to overindulge. Chamomile has been known as the earth apple, and an apple is such a magical fruit, it's quite nice to have that connection with this herb. It's a flower that's dedicated to the sun, so at the darkest point of the year it's quite nice to remind ourselves that the light is coming by having that connection. And it's also connected to resilience because it's a very resilient plant. It's very calming, and it's quite good at calming headaches, which, especially with all the electric light that we're dealing with in the dark evenings, it's probably quite a nice feature. The ingredients I've included for prophecy or sight are rosemary, elderflower, cinnamon and chrysanthemum. I really wanted to include rosemary. One of its folk names is the friendship bush, which I just think is lovely. And this is a time when we're really digging into the idea of gathering, whether we can, whether we can't. So this idea of extending this friendship bush and involving that in the tea is something that really appealed to me. It's also very anti-inflammatory. So for any of us that experience chronic or joint pain, I just thought it would be a nice ingredient to have, and you don't need much of it because it's quite a powerful flavour, and it is a powerful protective herb as well. It protects against nightmares, so when we're thinking about wanting to dig into that idea of dreaming and wishing for the future, it's quite nice to have that protection in place. And it's very good for focusing. It also is quite an authoritative herb, so it's quite fortifying in a number of different ways. Elderflower is a classic immune booster, and the elderflower I've put in this tea is elderflower that I harvested at midsummer, so it should be rather potent. But if you haven't got any of the flowers itself, you could just put half a teaspoon or a teaspoon of elderflower cordial into this tea, and that would work just as well. It is very good for fighting against flu and colds and upper respiratory infections, But it's also a plant that's connected to wishing, and a plant that's connected to seeing the fairies as well. So if you were looking for some this winter, it's quite a good thing to have on hand. It's also another protective herb. And the chrysanthemum, it's something you don't necessarily come across apart from as a decorative flower in Western traditions. But in Eastern traditions, it's very precious, and it is connected to the improvement of sight. And that's very literal, but here I'm taking that improvement of sight as personal insight as well. And also potentially the kind of future facing sight that dreaming or wishing might want to have help with. It's also very good at protecting against flus and colds. And cinnamon, which historically has been connected with mysteries. I'm going to leave that as a mystery for now. Again, it's very good at warding against the physical cold, and I know it's warmed up for a lot of us now, but it's quite a nice thing to have in winter tea. It's also very good for working to help joint pain, menstrual pain, and for fighting colds. But it probably needs to be done in small doses. And if you've set things up, as I have, to take advantage of this tea in 2 ways, I've set a simmer pot on the stove, and it must sit in there for no more than 10 minutes. If you haven't got cinnamon sticks, just a pinch of cinnamon will also work just as well. I'm going to go and see to my simmer pot, and I'll be right back. Well, that's simmering gloriously, and it's filling my entire house with scent. For those of you not familiar with simmer pots, they are very good protective smells and also cleansing smells, and it's quite nice to give your house a little cleanse at this time of year. The rosemary and the chamomile are very good herbs for that as well. And then obviously the protective influences of all of the herbs that I've listed will still apply. Largely, finally, I wanted to just talk about the ginger, which again isn't necessarily something we use a lot in Western traditions, but it's a very, very powerful plant. It was once worth its weight in sheep, which is just a really lovely fact. And as most of us probably know, it's got very good digestive properties, so it really helps with any kind of tummy troubles anyone might be having at this time of year. So again, will aid sleep actually, and is really immune boosting. So with all the coughs and colds and flus about at the moment, it's quite nice to have that extra backup. 2 teaspoons of mint, half a teaspoon of elderflower, half a teaspoon of chamomile, 1/4 teaspoon of chrysanthemum, 1/4 teaspoon of ground ginger, or the equivalent of a thumb tip or like a thumb fingernail's worth if it's fresh, and then a rosemary sprig and 1 cinnamon stick broken in half. You could also, if you didn't want to do the simmer pot, stir the other ingredients with the rosemary sprig and the cinnamon stick in the teapot for a minute or 2, just to infuse those flavours without actually having to leave them in. So there we go. There's loads of immune boosting, anti-inflammatory, protective herbs in this tea. So here we are, by the light of the candle and the LEDs of my tree, with our Magical Women winter tea. I'm sorry we didn't get to gather with you all for our winter gathering this evening, but hopefully you can brew yourself a cup of this and feel a little like, in some way, we're sharing something on the eve of the darkest, longest evening of the year. It's a really nurturing, festive, brightening, calming brew. And it's our gift at this time of the year to you. Here's to gathering in January, and until then, take care. Keep an eye on our socials. We'll be sharing more little gifts like this for you in the future. And have a fantastic Yuletide. Cheers. Happy solstice.